According to the 2016 National Survey on Drug Use and Health, 14.6 million adults ages 18 and older, which is 5.9% of that age group, had alcohol use disorder. That's 1 in 17. I am one of those people. Hi, my name is Jamie, and I'm an alcoholic. As of July 6th, I have 6 years of sobriety and 17 years in information security, compliance, and trust and safety. Even after all that time, I'm more afraid of disclosing that I'm a recovering alcoholic than disclosing any product vulnerability, security incident, or that I'm a queer woman in security due to the possible impact on my career. And despite this fear, I'm here today to share some facts, dispel some myths, and provide some guidance on how we can be inclusive and supportive of those living a clean and sober life. So what's alcohol use disorder? Alcoholism, also known as alcohol use disorder, is a chronic relapsing brain disease characterized by an impaired ability to stop or control alcohol use despite adverse social, occupational, or health consequences. It can range from mild to severe, and recovery is possible regardless of severity. Both alcohol use disorder and substance use disorder are considered brain diseases because alcohol and drugs actually change the brain. They change its structure and how it works. And according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, addiction, alcohol use disorder, and substance use disorder are a lot like other diseases, such as heart disease or diabetes. Both disrupt the normal, healthy function of the underlying organ and have serious, harmful consequences and are preventable and treatable. But if left untreated, it can last a lifetime. So in dispelling our myths today, here's our first myth that we're going to debunk. There's a single cause for AUD. There isn't one single cause for alcohol use disorder. Many risk factors come into play when it comes to the development of alcohol use disorder. Some we can't control, like our biological ones. Those would include our genetics, our development in utero, medical conditions, and some we may be able to address, such as our home and our work environment, and our family and our peer relationships. Another common myth is it's all about self-control. As much as we'd like to believe that with enough self-control, we can defy our brains and refrain from drinking, our work environments oftentimes work against us, either due to being on call or extended problem solving or context switching or many of the other things that we do, all the hats that we wear. We experience mental fatigue. We push ourselves to run on empty more than we should. Experiments have found that a tired brain will shift activity from the prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thinking, to the amygdala and the orbitofrontal cortex, associated with emotional impulsive response. And then we lose our grasp on self-control. Additionally, there's a relationship between stress and addiction. Extended periods of high stress also contribute to an increased likelihood of relapse. When we're stressed or afraid, our body produces the stress hormone cortisol as part of our fight or flight reaction. In true fight or flight situations, cortisol triggers the body to utilize glucose differently and suppress non-essential functions in order to efficiently react to the situation, among other things. When the situation passes, the level of cortisol drops. However, repeated acute stress and prolonged chronic stress continuously trigger the fight or flight reaction. This leads to cortisol levels remaining high and has an adverse effect on almost every system in the body. According to the findings from Rajita Sinha at the Yale Interdisciplinary Stress Center, abstinent recovering cocaine, alcohol, opiate, and nicotine-dependent individuals with high cortisol ACTH ratios show both higher compulsive motivation for drug craving, along with poor stress regulatory responses as measured by higher cortisol levels, which results in an enhanced susceptibility to subsequent addiction relapse. So that means a stressed brain, a fatigued brain, plus all of these work factors leads to, this is fine. I used to think of myself like Marion Ravenwood from Raiders of the Lost Ark. She was fiercely independent, even in the face of adversity, and used her drinking prowess as a way to further herself. I did too. I built rapport, trust, and respect while drinking. I was included in conversations and in projects I would not have been in if it wasn't for that glass in hand. Unfortunately, the movies aren't real life. I may have been a functional alcoholic in the workplace, but not in other facets of my life. Once I found out that I was pregnant with my son, I knew that I had to make a change. Change wasn't easy. I found that I struggled with most of the work and peer-related contributing factors. These contributing factors are not the same for everyone. Some people struggle with their biological risk factors. Some folks struggle with their home or their family environments or peer relationships. The ones that were most impactful to me were my work environment and my peer relationships. For example, in my workplace, throughout the course of my career, especially working in anti-abuse, I dealt with emotionally charged content. And that can be things from abuse reports that came into our abuse desk to reporting things to the National Cyber Tip Line. One of the other challenges I had was attending conferences and the prevalence of alcohol there, but also the pressure to fit in and be included. I didn't want to feel like an outsider. I didn't want to be excluded. Unfortunately, in many of our security-related roles and our anti-abuse roles, we are dealing with prolonged high stress. Remember the cortisol I talked about before? Not having that opportunity to let those levels come back down. Additionally, in security operation roles, many times people, especially in leadership, are in high-risk on-call situations. They want to support their team as much as possible, and so out of being a servant manager, they put themselves in a position where they are always on call for them, which is a very honorable thing, but they have to remember that you've got to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can assist others. Kegs in the office. Now, for some people, and including myself, this isn't as much of a trigger at this point in my recovery as it is for others. But that prevalence of alcohol in the office can make it challenging. It doesn't mean that it's that sole factor that will cause somebody to drink, but it's something that they think about and think, oh, there's that keg there. Nobody will know if I have a drink. The only person keeping them accountable is themselves. And every time they have that conversation with themselves, it takes a toll. Regarding peer relationships, the hallway track, or also known as networking at the bar. There's that pressure of you're not really being effective at a conference unless you're making those connections and building that trust and building that rapport. There is nothing wrong with the hallway track. However, recognizing that the hallway track is challenging for folks because of other pressures in their lives needs to be recognized. Dinners and happy hours. In other cultures, dinners and happy hours are things that require, or not require, but there's expected that there's alcohol involved. And there's nothing wrong with it, but it is an added pressure of how am I going to make it through this dinner? How am I going to save face in front of this customer? I don't want to be seen as vulnerable. I don't want to be seen as weak. I don't want that to translate as my product or my service or my company is vulnerable or weak. Another challenge are people who don't understand. People who aren't familiar with alcohol use disorder or alcoholism, or their experience with alcohol is a healthy one. And that's also okay. It's just challenging. And then there's those people that push boundaries, people that enable drinking, people who say, hey, why don't you have this drink? I know you said no, but it's okay. Nothing's gonna happen if you just have one drink. How about that drink? When I first seriously tried getting sober, I went about a year without drinking. And then at an industry conference in 2012, I tried to socialize as I used to with everyone in the bar in the evening. I ended up closing the bar 6 drinks later, escorting overly intoxicated people back to their rooms, and we drank the whole bar out of dark beer, which is kind of unheard of for Germany, but we did. Another year went by, and I was almost a year sober again, returning to that same conference, and while socializing, I was told, you deserve a drink. I was able to extract myself from that conversation, and I proceeded to have a panic attack, alone in my room. I knew my sobriety was in jeopardy if I stayed in that bar to network, but I was also afraid of the toll it would take on my career by not being in the room where it happens. But it's not just conference or industry culture that makes it challenging for those dealing with alcohol use disorder. I had a manager at a former employer who regularly held team events at the bar. I asked him if I could have dinners with the team or alternate events in locations in addition to at the bar because I was a recovering alcoholic. What he said to me has stuck with me for the remainder of my career and was one of the major factors for me leaving that organization. He said, "You aren't an alcoholic. I've seen alcoholics. You aren't a drunk." We don't tell somebody with diabetes, "Come on, eat the cupcake. Your blood sugar doesn't matter." Or to somebody with cancer, "You don't look like you have cancer. Why are you going to chemo?" Why should we treat anyone who has alcohol or substance use disorder any differently? For the record, I'm not against alcohol. I loved alcohol. Alcohol was my friend. Alcohol was my companion. Alcohol was my liquid courage. I'm not proposing a temperance movement. What I'm proposing is that let's turn risk factors into protective factors. That we as a community work together to make this happen. How do we leverage support and inclusion as tools for the 1 in 17 dealing with this today? We can make a difference on an organizational level, at a peer and management level, and at an individual level. So we go back to those contributing factors for myself. If we think about how could anybody else who works in security operations or anti-abuse who are experiencing these same contributing factors, how do we change things culturally within the ecosystem, within our organizations, as peers, as managers, where when they see these things, we've got ways to protect them. We've got ways to support them. As an organization, employee wellness programs are extremely helpful. But ensuring that the employee wellness program extends more than just, let's make sure that they've got healthy foods, or let's make sure that they can get gym memberships, or let's make sure that they are taking vacation, but also ensuring that our employee wellness programs and our benefit packages include real functional mental wellness. If you're holding a conference as an organization or an event where you've reserved multiple conference rooms, during your happy hour or during one of the parties, set aside one of those unused conference rooms with a posted Friends of Bill W meeting time. Black Hat does this. DEF CON does this. Others do this. For those familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous, they will meet there during that time and hold an impromptu meeting to provide support for those in recovery. If you're sponsoring a happy hour or a party event, in addition to the bar, have 2 creative signature drinks. We did this recently with the Decipher party. We had the Sazerac Hack, which was the alcoholic drink, and the Zero Trust, which was a non-alcoholic drink. This gives people the option to try something different than a plain soda in a tall glass with a black straw, and they won't feel like they're sticking out. Another thing that we did is at an event, we offered both beer and smoothies, but there was no secondary citizen experience. It was, hey, these smoothies also had the same labels as the beers had, and it really didn't matter. You don't have to come up and say, hey, I'm an alcoholic. Can I have the non-alcoholic drink? No, you can just be like, I feel like a smoothie today. And it doesn't matter whether you're an alcoholic, whether you're choosing not to drink for religious reasons, whether you're choosing not to drink because you just don't drink. It's not something that you like the taste of. As a manager or a peer, if someone confides their recovery with you, please listen and do not minimize their concern. Check your biases and educate yourself. If you're uncomfortable with them disclosing their recovery to you, take pause and ask yourself, why am I reacting this way? I've noticed over the years that conversations came to a screeching halt when somebody asked me why I wasn't drinking, and I told them I was in recovery. I found it was more effective to say jokingly, I was a professional, but I've retired. I used to be okay with saying this because it worked to stave off any follow-up questions. It ended things on a high note. I was funny. But now I'm not okay with it. In order to reduce the stigma of alcohol use disorder, we need to accept it for what it is and move on instead of minimizing it. Other things that managers and peers can do, they can attend the mental health first aid training. Mental health first aid training is available nationally. It helps you assist somebody experiencing a mental health or substance use related crisis. You learn risk factors and warning signs for mental health and addiction concerns, strategies for how to help someone in both a crisis and non-crisis situations, and where to turn for help. You learn how to assess for risk of suicide or harm. You learn how to listen non-judgmentally. You give reassurance and information. You encourage appropriate professional help, and you encourage self-help or other support structures for that individual. Also, if you know somebody who's in recovery, you can help by deflecting and redirecting invasive questions from others about why that person doesn't drink. If they're your coworker, or if they're your peer, and you're at a party together, this is an opportunity for you to intercede on their behalf, as long as they're comfortable doing so. Another thing you can do, you can check in with your team to ensure that they're not under prolonged or continuous high stress periods. If someone has been under continued stress, please encourage vacation time or work with them to reduce their stress load. Be inclusive. Hold team events at locations where the primary activity is not drinking. Remember, the purpose of this event is to focus on the team or the new hire. The purpose of the event is not to drink. It's just one of the things that's there. Just like we don't go to the burger bar for the sole purpose of eating hamburgers when we're going as a group. Okay, maybe I do, but the last myth, the longer one's been sober, the easier it gets. This 6th year has been my most challenging year of sobriety. I almost picked up this year in the middle of an extremely stressful time. Literally, still, to this day, some days, it's one day at a time. But nobody knows that I'm struggling. Nobody sees it. It's what I'm dealing with on the inside. That's what alcohol use disorder is. It's a medical condition on the inside that doesn't always show on the outside. As an individual, if you are struggling with alcohol use or substance abuse disorder, acknowledge concerns, including your own, about your alcohol use. Decide to change. If you want a different relationship with alcohol, you can make that happen. You may need support, you may need structure, but it is possible. Ask for help. If you're at a bar or even a hotel or airport bar and you're at the risk of picking up a drink or you're afraid you're going to drink too much, ask the bartender to page for a friend of Bill. You can even check with a concierge at major hotels to see if any friends of Bill have checked in and see if they want to get together. You can attend an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting or another addiction recovery group meeting. You can use your employer's Employee Assistance Program, their EAP. You can call the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration's National Helpline. This service provides referrals to local treatment facilities, support groups, and community-based organizations. What's most important is finding the assistance and the framing that helps you commit to the change you want to make, whether it's reduction, moderation, or abstaining from alcohol and drugs. Also, let's talk about it. Here at Black Hat, we have 2 open Friends of Bill W meetings on Wednesday and Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. in Coral C, North Hall lower level, where we'll talk about and support each other in recovery and those that are looking at pursuing recovery as an option for them. And remember, you're not alone. 1 in 17, right? September is National Recovery Month, and there are events across the United States to increase awareness and understanding around substance use disorder and mental disorders, and to celebrate the people who recover. I appreciate the opportunity to educate you all on some of the facts and some of the myths around alcohol use disorder. And if there's any questions, please head to the mics. If anybody would like to speak with me privately after this session, I will be heading over to the wrap room. If there's something that you'd like to talk about that you would rather not talk about in front of the group or ask as a question. Again, go ahead.
While she's coming up, I just want to really thank you for doing this talk. 5 years ago, I had a major relapse at DEF CON. I was really lucky to have a friend who kind of helped look after me, and at that time, I didn't know that there were meetings here or that there were, other people coming to these conferences who weren't partying and getting wasted every night. And it's really important that we support each other, and I think also, like you said, try to break down the stigma about talking about this stuff, because I think more people are dealing with it than we think. And it's because of some of the fears and I don't know, the stuff that you talked about. It was really great. I'm really glad that you did this. Thanks.
Thank you. That one's not on.
Jamie? Hey, thank you so much for this talk. My father was an alcoholic, my grandfather was an alcoholic, and sometimes I wonder if I'm more mindful of myself taking days where I make sure I'm not drinking or weeks where make sure I'm not drinking because I'm afraid of that. But I've been at many social events where I've decided, I'm going to go and not have a drink. I wanted to know, what's your favorite non-alcoholic drink to order when you're at a bar with coworkers?
So my favorite non-alcoholic drink, I do try to ask the bartender, hey, can you just make a mocktail for me? And sometimes I get back like this really weird, gross version of like every juice they have at the bar. That's not good. My default is just a ginger ale with lime. It tastes, good to me, but that's my preference. If I'm in a situation where I know that there's some question about whether or not, somebody will look at me suspiciously, like, hey, you're not drinking, or I'll get it poured in that like really tall glass with a black straw, which is really clear, like, ooh, she's not drinking. What I'll do is I'll go to the bartender in advance or to the waitress in advance. I will say, I will tip you $20 if you give me tonic water and lime in the low ball glass that you do for a vodka tonic with a vodka tonic straw. Keep bringing them and pretend they're vodka tonics and they're just tonic water and lime. I will continue to tip you all through the night if that happens. And it works really well, and it doesn't create an awkward social moment.
That's great. Thank you. I have one more question, but I'll follow up and say I really love the bars that when I order non-alcoholic drinks, they give them to me for free because they're supporting designated drivers. And my other question is that where does Bill W. come from?
So Bill W. comes from Alcoholics Anonymous. He was the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so that is the basis of hearing that Friends of Bill. It's the sort of the code phrase of saying like, oh, hey, I'm in recovery, or I'm doing 12-step. AA is not for everyone, and recognizing that everybody's program is their own program. Alcoholics Anonymous and 12-step programs are effective for those where it works for them within their personal belief system. But yep, Friends of Bill, that's related to Bill W. from Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think that we're out of time, so thank you very much for attending, and have a great rest of your conference.